This is the life, Bohemia. Tick, tick, boom. I have seen it on Netflix, and I definitely want to talk about this one. First, I got to tell you about the perspective that I have coming into this. I am familiar with the stage version of Tick, Tick, Boom. I've never seen it perform, but I have heard the full soundtrack to it. And I'm, of course, familiar with Rent. I am at that age where, when I was in high school, every theater kid, had a Rent phase. Well, you either had a phase of loving Rent or you had a phase of hating Rent, the latter of which some people never grew out of. I still like Rent. I don't love it the way I used to, but I still like it. But Tick, Tick, Boom was the musical that Jonathan Larson, the creator of Rent, wrote immediately before Rent, and it's about his trying to get the musical he'd been trying to make before Tick, Tick, Boom up and running that he'd spent years and years and years trying to get done. So it's semi-autobiographical and kind of meta. And it's always been an interesting piece because there's a lot going on in Tick, Tick, Boom that you can see how these ideas or these aspects of Jonathan Larson's life influenced Rent when he later made that. Here's the main thing I want to talk about with this, though. Because I'm coming at this from the perspective of someone who is familiar with the original work, I'm coming at this from the perspective of it as an adaptation more than anything else. And this is easily one of my new exemplars of adaptation. This is stunningly well adapted. And not just for the reasons that I think we normally tend to talk about adaptation. Because usually when you talk about adaptation, or certainly when I do, it tends to be about what does or doesn't translate to the new medium from the one that you were working before. Because some stuff doesn't carry over. Any medium has certain things that it does that other mediums don't do. And when you translate something from one medium to the other, you have to account for those differences, or something that did work transplanted directly or as directly as you can in the new medium suddenly doesn't work because in that medium it's not suited for. My own go-to example for this personally, and it's relevant and easy to pick on because it's also a musical, is the movie adaptation of Into the Woods. Because Into the Woods has a very drastic tonal shift between Act 1 and Act 2. But a big part of the reason why that works is because of the intermission. The end of Act 1 ends, and there's a big happily ever after song. Seems like the story's nicely wrapped up. Lights come up, you get up, you stretch, you go use the bathroom, and you have just enough time to realize, wait a minute. If everything seemed to end well, what's going to go on in the second act? And maybe you don't know exactly what's going to happen, but you have the time for that, for your brain to have that thought and to cushion the blow when the second act comes and is a completely different beast. Without the intermission, like the film, it's just a massive tonal shift that kind of comes out of nowhere and blindsides you. And it doesn't work because of the differences in the medium. There's no intermission in film, and there is in stage. So that's the kind of thing that a lot of people, myself included, tend to focus on when we talk about adaptation and things that you need to account for in adaptational changes. Something that doesn't often get talked about, though, is fixing problems with the original. I think there's a couple reasons for that. One of them is that for a very long time, it was standard for the work to just veer so wildly from the original work that the hope of it being loyal was just something that fans of original works were always like, why can't you just be more like the original thing, just because movies weren't? But since then, with the financial successes of things like everything from Lord of the Rings to Harry Potter to Twilight to the Hunger Games, the idea of being as loyal as possible has been pushed to the forefront. Unfortunately, the problem there is, aside from the issue I already mentioned about adaptational changes for medium, is sometimes there's actually stuff that doesn't work in the original. Not just doesn't work for the new medium, but actually wasn't very good. And that's something that almost never gets talked about, because generally the people talking about these adaptations the most are the fans of the original work who don't see the faults. Lin-Manuel Miranda, who adapted and directed this, very clearly loves Tick, Tick, Boom, and also very clearly understands that it has problems. And pretty much every one of them, every reason why I would say Tick, Tick, Boom has some great songs and great moments and great aspects, but is not a great show, are pretty much all addressed here. Everything from some specific songs that frankly aren't that good and are really superfluous are cut, but not actually. There's songs like Green Green Dress, which is a complete throwaway of a song, and it's not really in the movie, but it gets acknowledged because at one point somebody turns on a radio and you hear it playing. So like, oh, there's your acknowledgement of the song, but we're not going to spend time on it because it didn't help. Same thing with the song Sugar, which again gets an acknowledgement, but does not take up more time beyond that. So there's things like that, and little moments where small tweaks happen to the numbers, little bits were altered or specific sections were pulled that undermined it. And a really good example of that is from the song Johnny Can't Decide. I like that song a lot. That was a song that spoke to me very much from the very first time I heard it. As somebody who has a lot of desires to put creative works out into the world and who wants people to find them and for those to have an impact on people, but who also is trying to balance a life. The same time that I have all those desires, that song spoke to me a lot. Except there's kind of a spoken word bit in the middle where the character clearly has their head up their own ass. Like, when sung and putting the emotions forefront, it's great. But then when he just speaks and he says, this isn't in the movie, this is in the original version, and he says, I want to sit at my piano and write a song that people will remember and do the same thing every day for the rest of my life. It's like, you pretentious little turd, get your head out of your ass. And that bit's cut from the song. It's not in the movie, which also speaks to an overall minor tonal tweaking that not only is Lin-Manuel Miranda able to do, but also Andrew Garfield, playing Jonathan, is able to do as well. So props to him, because he gives a great performance. He's a very good singer. But he brings just the right sort of glaze of self-awareness. Because the ways in which Tick, Tick, Boom, the original version, can kind of be insufferable is a bit like that thing that I quoted. This idea of somebody freaking out because they're about to turn 30, but they haven't had a major artistic achievement yet in their life, and they haven't done something that has changed the medium that they work in by the time they're 30. That's kind of a stuck-up, self-important, messed up thing to be really super hung up about. And the character is super hung up about it. It can be distancing. It can really make you just not inclined to like them. You know what helps? Just that little bit of self-awareness. So the impression that I got from Andrew Garfield playing Jonathan Larson was, look, I understand that my feeling this way about my life and my work and being as hyper-focused as I am is actually not good for me and is kind of dumb and isn't a good thing, but I can't help it. This is still how I feel. Now, he never says anything to that effect, but it's in the performance. Rather than just bemoaning all of his concerns about his artistic legacy, when people push back on him, like, is this really what has you so bothered? He gets this kind of apologetic look on his face, like, yeah. It's like an admission to, like, I know, I can't change how I feel, but I know. And I'm like, that is what I need. That is what this story needs to work so that it's not insufferable. And it brings it. It provides exactly what a piece of work with a lot of great moments and a lot of potential, but some notable faults to it, needed. It needed the eye and the scissors of somebody who loved all the things that worked, but also recognized what didn't. That's not something we see very often in terms of adaptations, because the people who direct these kinds of, well, any kind of adaptations, they tend to come in two main flavors. Either they're directors for hire who don't particularly care about the specific work and they're just there to get the job done. And that's not to say they don't turn out good work. They can. But that's to contrast with the people who are super passionate because they're massive fans of the original work and they want to preserve it as much as possible. And that's what I'm used to seeing, is one of those two in, to some degree. But to see someone who clearly loves it, but also gets it's not perfect, that's wonderful. It's a really excellent adaptation. And I also think it's good in and of itself. I've been talking about it as an adaptation. It's a great adaptation, but I also think it's good in and of itself. The performances are good. The singing is good. It's well pulled together. It is nicely small and intimate. And yet they were able to take one of the songs that's not a bad song, but it was like the diner song, and made that this hugely epic feeling song, partially because of pulling in a crap ton of ringers, Broadway legends to appear in that, that was just nice. If you know Broadway at all, I was like, oh, dang. And Therapy, the way they did the song Therapy was gold. It was flippin' genius. Loved it. This is really well put together. If you like theater or have ever been a theater kid and you don't already know this story, I think you'll find something to like here. This is a story about passion and about struggle and about trying to find how to make the grind work when the grind is also your passion. It's hard. And this captures it, I think, quite well. So I highly recommend Tick, Tick, Boom. I'm not sure if it would have gotten a proper place on my best things of 2021 if I had, gotten it, if I had finished seeing it in time of shooting that video, but it certainly would have gotten a mention. It's dang good. Have you seen it? What'd you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Like, share, subscribe. Patreon's up there. That's how I pay my bills. There's also a link in the description, plus links to other things like my other activities on social media and Twitch and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Check them out or don't. It's okay. Take a relaxed attitude around here. So you just come on back next time you need a break. Thanks for sticking around into the credits. None of this would have been possible without my Patreon supporters. In particular, I want to thank Robin Powell, Tracy Scrabbit, Vincent Paul Bartolucci, Robin Moore, Shayla Gourlay, and Bookworm. Thanks for keeping this going. And to everybody,